Hello, and in this lesson, we are going to focus on the 3-point lighting system, a classic setup that helps make a scene look polished and professional. We'll break down each of the 3 lights, the key light, the fill light, and the backlight, and I'll show you how they work together and explain how to use them effectively in Blender. And by the end of this session, you'll understand how to control mood, depth, and focus in your scene using lighting alone. Let's get started. So let's open up Blender and let's open up the barrels. This is where we left off in the last lesson, where we created a barrel together with one material using the shader editor and the UV editor. Okay, now we don't need these right now, so we're going to close these by getting the crosshair, dragging over and just closing them down. So we've got the barrel is the main scene. Let me get my screencast keys going for you. There we go. And there is a little bit of setup for rendering out that we're going to do. And this time we're going to just close down our properties a little bit, open them up, and we're going to open up another window just here, okay? And this window, we're going to set it to 3D viewport. So now we've got 2. And what we're going to do with this one just here is we're going to put a camera into our scene. We're going to place it in the direction we would like to render our barrel out. And then we'll leave it here so we can see what it looks like in rendered mode, but we can still remain in solid shading just whilst we set up the scene. So before we move this scene around, let's add a camera into our scene. You can either come up to add or press Shift and A, and then come down to camera. Now it adds it at the world origin. Okay, if I just hide our barrel, it's called cylinder, let's just rename that. Okay, and if I just hide the barrel, you can see the camera has come in facing in the direction I was looking, but at the world origin. So if I bring the barrel back, let's bring it to our viewport to get the camera looking at what we're looking at. And you can do that with a really handy shortcut. It's Control Alt, and then on your numpad, it's 0. And that just aligns the camera to view. Now, you can come out of the camera mode just by using your middle mouse wheel button, or you can click on this toggle camera view to come in and out, okay? And there's lots of ways you can move this camera around. With it selected, I can use this scene now, just to hold G to grab it, and we can move that around. We can do it in this scene. Or there's a really handy way to maneuver around your viewport. And if I just press Q, you won't necessarily have this. You can see that opens up our quick favorites menu. And you can save anything you want here as a quick favorite. So anytime you're in this viewport, specifically the 3D viewport, and I press Q, I have these shortcuts. How do we set that up? Well, if we just go up to View, I'd like to introduce you in navigation to these two here, Fly Navigation and Walk Navigation. Now, I don't like Fly, but I'll show you what it is. If we just click on that, okay, and then I move my mouse, you can see that my viewport is now sort of spanning and orbiting a bit more like a game. This is like you're on top of a tank controlling the turret. When I press WASD to control it like you do in a game, you can see now with Fly, we fly around our scene. Now my hand's not pressing anything and it's continuously moving. This is why I'm not that keen. If I hold S too long, you can see it speeds up quite a lot. And flying can be quite hard to control. So I'm going to right mouse button to stop that and just negate what I just did. I'm going to come back up to view, come down to navigation, and click on walk navigation. Now this is very similar. This is like a first person shooter style. So my mouse controls where we're looking. W, S, A, and D, or WASD if you want to do it correctly. This just helps us move around our scene, and this is very, very useful. And you can do this whilst in camera view mode. So just to show you again, that was view, navigation, and fly or walk. So have a play with these and see which one you prefer. And then once you've decided which one's your favorite, come back into the menu and on your chosen navigation, right click, and then yours will say here, add to favorites. If I come to fly, add to quick favorites. Okay, so add whichever one of these you like the most to your quick favorites. And then in your viewport, what that's done is when you press Q, it opens up your quick favorites and you can see it's been added. I've also got scale because we're scaling a lot within Blender when we're building and modeling. If I now click that, we can now access that lovely shortcut. back in so we're in the correct camera. And now if I press Q, walk navigation, we can control where that camera is looking. And if you look over here in the right hand side at this camera here, and I come back into the 3D viewport, walk navigate, you can see I am controlling that camera. Very, very powerful. So what I'd like you to do is just position your camera where you would like to render this barrel out as a 2D image. And this is useful. So let's just place it somewhere nice. You can control the speed you maneuver with the middle mouse wheel. So if I scroll down, you can see now it's quite slow. If I scroll up, you can see it gets a bit faster. So just have a play. Place your camera in a nice view. So you can see here, I can see the front of our barrel, I can see the top of our barrel, and we can see a little bit of the defining edges around the side. And that's perfect. So now we've done that in our 3D viewport, I can come over to this scene that we've set up and press 0 on the numpad, and that will put it into the camera view, not in our 3D viewport. We can zoom in, so we can fill this space up with our barrel. We can scroll along, we can come to rendered view, and when you click rendered view for the first time, if we just come down to this little TV, the little render properties, you can see it is set to Eevee. So I'm just going to change that to cycles, and we'll look at Eevee at a later date, and we'll look at all these settings in just a second, okay? But you can see it's quite dull at the minute, and that's absolutely fine. We're going to light it in a moment, and we'll set this up depending on your computer so that we can render out really nice pictures. So we'll leave that for now. We just want to make sure we can see our barrel. So I am going to now come into my 3D viewport, and we don't want to see this camera now. We've got it set up. We can hide this by clicking on the camera. Okay, you can do it in your hierarchy. Make sure that your mouse is in the 3D viewport and press H to hide. And that just removes it from our scene. So now we've got a nice clean workspace, and we can work freely in this 3D viewport and rely on this one to show us what the camera's looking at. And the last thing I want to set up in here is just turn off all these gubbins that we've got hanging around. So we don't need the Cartesian coordinates, we don't need this just here. So we can come up and click viewport overlays and turn that off. And then just to the left of it, show gizmo, we can turn that off as well. And you can see now we've got a nice clean image, and this will start to update. Once we add lights and we add in a mesh underneath like a floor plane, this will start to really pop. So the first thing I want to do, we can see if I come to front view by pressing 1 on the numpad, you can see our barrel is below the world center. So we just want to raise it up so it's flat on the floor. If I click on the barrel, you can see our origin is in the center of the barrel. So let's move that to the bottom, and it'll just make our life a little bit easier. I'm just going to make this a bit brighter. It's quite bright. That'll do. So I'm going to go into edit mode, go to face select, and I'm going to select all of these lowermost faces, okay, by pressing Alt, left mouse button click, and selecting all of those. I'm then going to press Shift and S, and that brings up our lovely cursor selection wheel, and I'm going to come down to cursor to selected. And what that's done is, because I've got multiple faces selected, it's just worked out the median point of all of those faces and placed the cursor there. If we scroll, we can now see, if I go to front view, you can see that cursor is flush with the bottommost faces of our barrel. I can then come into object mode by pressing tab, right click on our barrel and come to set origin, or you can come up to object and set origin. And we want to set the origin to the 3D cursor. So if you just take note, that's where our origin is currently, in the middle of our barrel. I can go I can right click, set origin, and origin to 3D cursor. And it moves it to the bottom of the barrel. Now, why have we done that, you might be asking? If I now open my sidebar and come up to item, you can see that it's now registering that our barrel is 0.43815 below the world origin. Okay, so instead of us having to try and get it in the right place, we can just go 0, and that will bring it up. Now, our camera, let's bring that back. So we just click on this little closed eye here. We can now click on our camera, come into camera view, and just adjust it to ensure that we're looking at our barrel correctly. So I'm going to hold Q to bring up our favorites, walk navigation, and I'm just going to place that again where we want it. Looks good. And I could just move this scene a little bit. So there we go. That looks good. I can even bring that up. There we go. I'm going to come out of the camera view, and once again, I'm going to just, in my 3D viewport, my workspace, I'm just going to hide the camera by pressing H, and now the barrel is on the floor. Now the reason we've done that is because we're going to add a plane underneath. Or we're actually going to, you can add two things, a square plane or a circular plane. And then we're going to add a wall behind our barrel so that when we add some lights in, we've got some nice bounces of light and nice reflections. And this will just make our render pop once we render it out. So first thing I want to do is bring our 3D cursor back to the world origin. So by pressing Shift and S, you can now choose your cursor to world origin, and that will just bring it back to the center. And that just means that whenever we add anything to our scene, it will be at the world origin. Whenever you add something to your scene, it comes into the scene wherever your 3D cursor is. And I'll show you that. If I put my cursor over here, you can see it's now floating up in the air. And I go add, mesh. I'm going to do it with a circle. You can see our circle has been added up there, and we don't want that. So I'm just going to undo that, bring our cursor back to the world origin, Shift and S, cursor to world origin. There we go. Now I do want the circle, so let's do that. Let's go to mesh, not curve. You want mesh and circle, and it adds this circle into our scene. Now it is just a bunch of edges, but no faces. So for the purpose of this lesson, we don't need to worry about topology. We can just press F to fill, and let's scale that up a little bit. That looks good. And what I'm doing is I'm just going to be creating a bit of a floor plane, and then we're going to extrude up at the back just to give us some nice bounces or some location for the light to bounce off and react within our render. So what we can do is we can go into edge select mode, and I'm just going to make this a little bit darker so it's a bit easier for you guys to see. Not going to go from halfway, I'm going to go back one, and I'm going to select all of these faces around here by holding Control and select, and that just selects all those edges going around. And I'm just going to extrude it up. So E to extrude, constrain it to the Z, and bring that up. And that'll do. So let's just shade this as smooth. Okay. Now it looks quite rigid because I'm in solid shading and I've got all this turned on. You can turn this back down now if you'd like to. And you can see it just removes some of those edge lines. And let's have a look at what lights we've got. So let's bring the cursor back to the center. Cursor toward origin. There we go. I'm going to close my toolbar and my sidebar. And let's have a look at what lights we've got on offer. So if I go to add, we come down to light, you can see we've got 4 different lights. Now, let's have a look at the point light to start with. Now that does get brought in at the cursor again, so I keep moving the cursor by accident, so let's just make sure it's at the world origin. Let's bring in a point light, and because it's now under the barrel, let's just grab it on the Z axis and bring it up. And if you look in the render view that I've got set up just here, let's make it a bit clearer. We'll go into material preview. If I just hide that, you can see not much is being shown. So to see the light affecting our scene in material preview, we can turn on to scene lights. And I'm even going to tick this one, scene world. Now this point light acts like a bulb, if that makes sense. So the light is emanating from this origin in a spherical shape outwards in all directions. If I just click on the barrel and look at data properties, you can see that this is very unique to a mesh. But if I click on the points light, you'll see that it changes to a light and we get given some different options. The two main options to look at with regards to all the lighting are the color, so we can change the color of our light, and the strength. And 3 of the lights in this menu, the point, the spot, and the area, are measured in watts. And you can turn this up and you can turn it down. Now the point light also offers us a radius, and this just means that if I turn this up to say 25, okay, and I now adjust the radius, you can see it's made everything a bit softer. It's made the shadows a bit softer, and what's happening is it's remaining at a strength of 25 watts, but the size of the area that's emanating this light is just a bit bigger, and it just makes your shadows look a bit softer. So you can play with the strength and the radius to see how that affects your scene. And if I turn it down, you can see we get a very hard edge, a very hard shadow. And if I bump it up again, you can see it now makes it soft. But you want to be careful not to go through mesh objects because you can get some funkiness going on. Okay, so let's just turn that one down. So you can just change the light here, but it's best practice because you notice if I go to spot, the name in the hierarchy remains as point. So we'll just delete that for now and add in a spotlight. That just keeps all of our names nice and clean. Let's bring that one up. Okay, and the spotlight, it's like a torch. So if you imagine there was a torch being held or a spotlight like from a studio, it's facing in the direction of this cone. Okay, so if I rotate the light, you can see how that spotlight affects our world. Compared to the point light, it's a little bit different. However, we can change the color still. We can change the strength. And we can change the radius of the bulb within the spotlight. And that just softens its shadows. But we've also got this option down here called beam shape. Now, if you just look at the orange lines and I change this, you can see I can make it wider or I can make it smaller. And then blend, if you just look at the edge of the light here, if I turn that down, once again, it's gone quite hard. And then if I put this blend up, we get some softer blending between the areas that are not lit. Slightly different to the radius. Now if I play with the radius, you'll see that internal shadow that the barrel is creating is just a little bit softer. And that's because we've got light. If you imagine, I'll use the line this time. This light is coming from the edge of the bulb here, like so. So the light's coming down and it's able to just react a little bit softer next to our barrel. But if I turn this radius down, it's now coming from there. And you can see why we're getting a bit of a harder shadow. Okay, I'll do this side as well. So the radius is the bulb size. It's the size of the light source. And with the spotlight, the beam shape is the size of the beam that's coming out. So it sort of flares it out for us. And then the blend hardens or softens that. And you can also have a look to see what your cone is doing and have a look around your scene. Might be a look that you're going for. I'm going to turn that one off. I'm just going to delete these. Right, so that's the point light and the spotlight we've had a look at. Let's have a look at the area light and let's bring that one up. Now the area light is a lovely light. It's very soft. It's used in a lot of rendering situations. You can see with the area light that we've got this shape going around it, and that's where the light is emanating from. And you can see here in shape, it's a square. Got a few different options. So the square and the disc, when you scale these, either by coming down to size, or scaling in your scene, they scale uniformly. If I come to rectangle, you can see now we can scale on the X and the Y individually. That's very useful. And then we've also got ellipse, which is the same as a circle, but we can scale it individually on the X or the Y. These have all got different uses. Let's just change that back to square. As always, we can change the color. We can change the strength. And we've got spread as well. So this is like a 180, so you can see the shadow up here. If I turn this down, you can see it didn't really look like much was happening in our 3D viewport, but in the render scene, the light was focused a little bit more towards the barrel. If I just turn that up, you'll see it happening. Okay. And that's the three lights that we use mainly for lighting props. If I just undo that and get rid of it. And now let's have a look at the sunlight. Now this is very similar to Game Engine's directional light. If I bring this one up and I rotate it, okay, you can see the shadows do move. And if I just set that like that and then rotate it on the Z, that'll do. Now if I move this, you can see nothing happens. And that's because what this is this is acting like a sun in our world. It's not at this location. So unlike the point, the spot, and the area light, this part where the origin is not where we're emanating the light from. If you imagine now, there's a sun all the way up here somewhere. So we've, like so, okay, there's our sun. and it's beaming light in this direction down. So we can place this anywhere we want in the scene and it's not going to change what we're seeing with light, but we can rotate the direction that it affects our scene. Now, unlike the other three lights, the sunlight is not measured in watts per se, it's measured in watts per metered square. So it's actually a smaller value. If I just bring it in a point light to show you, bring that one up here. If you look at the point light, it's measured in 10 watts. And if I bump this up to say 144, it's very bright. That's not very nice at the minute, but that's how we measure the strength of our point light. The sun is measured, as it says just below, in watts per meter square. So if I turn this up, you don't want to go too high because you can really over brighten your scene, overexpose it. Doesn't look very nice. Let's undo that. Just going to delete this point light. Click on the sunlight. As always, we can change the color. We can change the strength. The angle is the angle that the light is coming in. Now you just have a play with this and you can see it just makes it harder or softer. So that's almost like how high is the sun within the sky. Now with cycles, you also have this option for multiple importance. Just take note of that. We might need to come and tick this or untick this later on. I'm going to delete the sunlight and I'm just going to tidy up my hierarchy now so we can get ready to start lighting our scene, ready to render it out. So I'm going to click on collection. I'm going to call that asset, and that's going to be for our barrel. I'm going to click on scene collection, add another one, add another one. So we've got two new collections. This one's going to be, we'll call it 3-point light setup. You call it whatever you want. And scene props. I'm going to put the circle, which we can call floor, or you can even call it scene. And I'm going to put that into scene props. And 3-point lighting setup. We'll put the camera in there as well because we're not going to move it, and then we can set the lights up around the camera. And keeping your hierarchy nice and organized and tidy makes all the difference. So I'm going to remove these, and I believe I've got a sun. Let's get rid of that. Cool. So let's now create a 3-point lighting system, and this is made up of 3 lights. A key light, which sets the flavor, sets the scene, sets the tone, okay? A fill light, which complements the key light, and a backlight, just to add some edge definition. So let's add the first one, which is the key light, and I'm going to use an area light. I'm going to come to top view by pressing 7 on the numpad, and just move that just to outside of our circle, our floor, and now I'm going to bring it up a little bit, rotate it on the X by 90 degrees. And now I'm going to have a look up the top, and I'll just keep an eye on where I'm placing this light and look at what it does to our scene. Already it's looking quite nice, it's starting to come to life. I'm just going to bring that over to the right, and there's no one place fix all for all of our scenes. When you're lighting, you're going to have to play every single time to get it looking right. But normally, your light, your key light, is in front of your mesh, what you're trying to light up, a little bit off center and about 45 degrees. That's normally what you would go for. And let's just place that about there. And you can see already our barrel is looking lovely. It looks nice and lit. We've got the nice soft background, and that's why we added in this floor. We can even pump this up a little bit. Not that high. That looks quite nice. I think that will do. So now let's add in our fill light. I'll just change the colors so we can see what they're all doing. So I'm going to make this one a bit of yellow. We'll come back and change the color in a moment. I'm just going to duplicate this. I've just noticed that the area has gone into scene props. So I'm just going to move that into 3-point light setup and open it up so we can see. So let's name this one. This is our key light. Okay, I'm going to click on this key light and duplicate it on the X, bring that one across and rotate it 90 degrees and it goes the correct direction, and we can just bring that one over. You want to have the fill light complement this key light but not overpower it. So now our scene, it looks a bit overexposed, a bit oversaturated, okay? So I'm going to change the color so we can see what it's doing. We want it to complement the light and sort of, if I just turn it off, you can see we've got some shadows here. It's not too bad. If I just turn this one right up, we can see we've got some darker shadows here. Now, it's not too bad, but what you'd like to do with a three-point lighting system, you can keep the shadows, but still look and have a bit more detail on the barrel. And that's what our fill light does. We use this to just add a little bit more light to the darker side of our object, but not overpower what the key light is doing. So let's just turn that one down. You'll see a little bit better what I mean. We can have a play with its location and maybe even rotate it. And I'm going to come into front view. Now, both of these, if this was a character, you would have these at eye height, okay? And that's just to highlight the facial features and some of the details. We can just bring them down a little bit. And then this fill light, I'm going to bring down a little bit more. And if we look at our barrel now, we've got some nice yellow light shining on the majority surface of our barrel. And then where it's darker and in the shade, in the shadows, we've used this fill light just to add a little bit more definition and just bring it to life without overpowering our scene. I'm going to turn it down a little bit more. That looks quite nice. And I'm going to turn the size down maybe. And it's just about having a bit of a play. So now we've got some softer lights behind our barrel, but we can see all the details. I might even rotate this one a little bit. Come back to top view, move that one over. And you can see, you can just have a play here. So if I turn the size all the way down, it goes off. If I turn it up, we get some nice softer shadows. There we go. You know what, I might even turn this one up. Let's get soft shadows all around. Awesome. So now we want to add a backlight, and this will just bring some edge definition to our barrel. We don't want it to overpower what we've just done with our key and our fill light. Let me just rename that. So I'm not going to use an area light this time. I am going to use a point light. And we can just add that in, set the world center, and as the name suggests, it goes behind your object. And we're going to want to raise that up. Now this will be a little bit of finessing. You don't want to come too high. And I'm going to move it over to the left in this case. So my light source is coming from this direction. So I'm going to just sort of highlight the edges of the barrel over here. You can see this is quite nice. That might do for now. Let's adjust the values. So if I turn it up too high, you can see it's lighting up the back far too much. And we're getting light seeping over to the top of the barrel and it's overpowering the fill light. So I want to turn that down. Let's undo that. I'm going to set the radius up a little bit. And there we go. So you can see now we've got a little bit of definition here on this edge. If I bring it down a little bit, and maybe bring it forward a little bit. There we go. So now looking at our barrel, you can see on this top edge, we've got a little bit of edge definition. It just adds a little bit more polish to our scene. Got a little bit just here as well. And I can change the color so you can see that a bit clearer. There we go. So now we're just defining the barrel edge. There's no extreme dark spots. And that, in summary, is the three-point lighting system. If I just hide the floor, you've got 1, 2, 3 lights, which you can now move. If I just grab them and constrain them by holding Shift and Z to just the X and the Y, we can move these around and get a really nice feel for what we're looking for. I think they were good where they were, so we'll leave them there. I think this pink one, the backlight, is a little bit overpowering. So we're just going to turn that down. Okay, the radius, I think that's quite nice. Maybe turn it back up a little bit now. And you can see it just takes a little bit of finessing, a little bit of playing to get the look you're going for, but that looks good. Now we're using some odd colors, so let's now set these all back to white. And I'm just going onto them and I've set them to whatever color, okay? I don't have to try and aim for the center, I can just come down to saturation and turn that right down. And that looks quite nice, okay? This one might even be a little bit powerful now, so we can just turn that one down. I even rotate this one a little bit. And I'm just going to turn the floor back on. The reason, once again, the reason we applied this floor was so that we get some nice light bounces. However, we'll see a better effect if we smooth this edge out and add a material to it. So let's add the material first. You can see in my scene, I've only got my barrel, so let's create a new one. Let's call this floor or whatever you would like. I'm going to turn the roughness down to 0, and I'm going to keep the metallic down to 0. And this will just create a nice reflective surface because light loves reflections. And you can see now it is starting to look a lot more realistic. Now let's go into edit mode with our floor selected and select these edges just here. So I'm just clicking one and then control and clicking over here, and it will just select all of those. Now we want to add a bevel to this hard edge. And if you just look at how we've got some shadows just here, we want to try and remove those. So control and B. And before I click, I'm going to use my middle mouse wheel just to add in a nice chamfer, a nice smooth curve. And that'll do. And then go into object mode. And you can see that hard edge has now been removed. But we've got these, now I've added in the nice smooth material, we've got these light reflections in the back and you can see them just here. We don't want those. So what are they? If I come to this area light, remember earlier I said about this multiple importance. If we untick that, you can't see it disappearing in our material preview, okay, but it does disappear within our render. And that's because this is basically Eevee, and you've got to go and set it up properly to try and remove these, play with your light thresholds. But within cycles, it does it for you. So let's remove these ones as well. So let's click this one, multiple importance, we can remove that. And although this one here, the point lights, we can remove it if you'd like. That just keeps all the light information on our object. We're getting all the light bounces, but it just removes any unwanted reflections of the light that we're rendering. So there we go. We've quickly set up a 3-point light system. And I'll just name this one and place it into the right collection. And now we're pretty much good with our scene, and we can maybe render this out. Although I think white is a bit too much with regards to this material. So I am just going to make this darker. Nice dark gray. That looks nice. And we can see our barrel is really starting to look realistic now. You can see the benefit of that backlight in all of its glory. Just that little bit of edge highlighting just there really, really makes all the difference. So go and set up your scene with your barrel, create a floor, add in your 3 lights. So you've got your key light, this sets the scene. So one more thing is if you add a little bit of blue, sometimes it can just add a little bit more realism to your scene. So we'll do that, just a tiny, tiny little bit of blue. If you add a bit of red, it can add a bit of drama to your scene. If you add a bit of green, that's normally used with heroes or in specific, like if you've got a hero entering or character, you'd like to showcase this as the good guy. You can use green. Or so you can have a play here, go and have a look at color theory and look at how films use color to depict different moods. Blue is quite nice to add a little bit more realism to your scene, especially when you've got a dark grey floor scene like we have. Set up your lights, set them up so it looks nice and you've got a nice looking image here, and then come back together and we'll learn about how we render this scene out.